Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again. Today, we're going to dive right into the English Restoration period of theater history. And this is right before we get into realism and naturalism as we move more into the late 19th century and early 20th century. All right, so I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen with you as we get into this lecture here. Okay, so we start to see in the English Restoration that this is a type of theater that is really meant for the aristocracy, the upper class, and it's also a time in which we see that women are starting to be featured on the stage. Now, while this is good in a sense, we also start to see that women quite haven't quite gotten a voice just yet, but they are featured on the stage in England at this time, and we'll get into that just a little more later on. So the English Restoration, just to give you a little bit of historical background, this occurs after a period of political unrest. This occurs because Charles I is executed, and Oliver Cromwell, who's a Puritan, he takes control, establishes what is known as the Commonwealth. Under this rule, theater is called corrupt and eventually outlawed in 1642. And I think this is good to pay attention to because, as I talked about earlier on in the semester when we were still meeting face to face, that we see this throughout theater history. Theater is considered a noble art form, then it falls out of popularity, it regains popularity. We see this throughout time. So this is at the beginning of this, we sort of see when theater is called corrupt and then it gradually regains popularity. So in 1660, Charles II, who had been living in exile in France, was invited back to reclaim the throne. And English citizens yearned for entertainment, diversion from what was a repressive and joyless existence under Cromwell. So under the Puritans, they said no entertainment, no fun of any kind. Now we get into, now the English Restoration, however, is often called country club theater. And that's simply because, as I said a little earlier, that it's basically written by, performed by, presented to the elite, the wealthy, the aristocrats. It celebrates one class and ridicules all others who are not wealthy, who are not nobility or royalty. Now, Charles II, he restores theater. He brings about this restoration of theater and entertainment. So he's a patron of the arts, he's a lover of the arts, but within his court he celebrates wit, beauty, money, all wealth. These were all needed to be part of his court, to be part of his inner circle. Wealth and nobility offered a wide array of privileges and power, and this includes fathers arranging marriages for their offspring, controlling the family's money, and we see that through much of history, actually. When we talk about the specific drama, there is basically one plot. So this involved an elegant but poverty-stricken young man of fashion pursuing a beautiful, witty young woman in order to either steal her virginity and dump her, just for fun, or to marry her and steal her fortune, also just for fun. There were other plot lines mainly used to mock the lower classes, and these could be, the overly serious, such as the Puritans, sort of mocking Oliver Cromwell and all of the very serious Puritans who didn't want us to have any entertainment or theater because they were no fun, and the Irish, etc. So it could be very offensive, very mocking to people who were not either English or wealthy or both normally. So a playwright could make a decent living writing the same formulaic plays over and over again. However, playwrights only got paid if their play ran for a third night, and most did not. So Aphra Behn, we know Aphra Behn because she wrote the play we are reading this week, one of the plays we're reading this week, called The Rover. And I hope all of you have read it. It looks like, I'm going to double check again, but it looks like a lot of you did submit your IRs this week. So Afrben was she's really known because she's the first woman to make her living as a playwright in England. And her plays were mainly successful because she did follow that same plot line, and she did kind of she had to follow that same mood and tone of the other playwrights of the other plays that were written by men. And she may not be considered overtly feminist in the way that she wrote, because the public would not have liked this. She would have fallen out of popularity if she was trying to make any overt feminist statements. But the way that she did go about being, sort of subtly putting feminism into her plays was that she featured strong, smart, witty central characters who were at least a match for their male counterparts. And these were not always damsels in distress that she was writing. Some other playwrights, obviously Afrben, The Forced Marriage, The Town Fop, and The Rover. William Congreve, who was another popular playwright, he wrote The Way of the World, often considered the masterpiece of the era. George Etheridge, The Man of Mode, or Sir Fopling Flutter. We'll see that there were sort of stock characters like that, Sir Fopling Flutter and other sort of witty names like that. William Wycherley, The Country Wife, and The Plain Dealer. So when we talk about the actual theaters, these were small, intimate spaces. The Theatre Royal at Drury Lane was only 80 feet long, with over 50 feet of the space was taken up with lobby, scenery, and stage. The audience area was 20 to 25 feet deep. And the apron, which is an extension of the stage floor beyond the proscenium arch, was the invention of this time period. It was used constantly as a special place to allow the actor closer proximity to the audience. And scenery was merely background decoration. Sometimes audience members would simply go to the theater to see the new scenes. And we see that with, there's certain letters and journals that were kept during this time when people would talk about, that they wanted during the weekend, they wanted to go and check out the new scenes that were being presented at the theater. Some of them didn't necessarily care what the plot was. They just wanted to go see the new scenes. Once the newness of the scenery rubbed off, actors and actresses were closely scrutinized by audience members, and they would even jump on stage if so inclined. So it was a little bit rowdier, as you can see. And this is a picture of the Drury Lane Theatre. This is one of the most famous theaters of the Restoration period. And you can see, it doesn't show it too well, but you can see that there are a lot of rows, a lot of the audience members can go all the way up to the very front there. So they're very close to the stage, which obviously allows them to be able to jump on stage if they so please. So actors and acting. The Restoration actor, though not as restricted as in the Theatre of Asia, so they didn't really rely so much on these gestures and sort of a symbolic way of acting. They were cast according to type. So we have these stock characters. Some men played bad boys, others played buffoons. Some women's roles were seductive and forward, while others were more quiet and reserved. And there were various stock characters, as we saw in Commedia dell'arte, but such stock characters were Lady Fanciful, Mrs. Squeamish, and Sir Clumsy. You can imagine how each of them were supposed to portray their characters. You can see it right in the titles there. So that gives it away just a bit. But most Restoration plays feature the leading lady in male disguise. Now, these were called breeches roles, so that all may, these little typo there, but basically breeches roles just meant that the women were wearing pants. So at the time, this was considered very scandalous because the pants would show the woman's hips, calves, ankles. And while this was the first inclusion of the actresses in the professional theater in England, and while their social status had not necessarily improved, many were able to make a good living in theater. So, yeah, I mean, actresses, women were, they were acting on stage and they were being featured in these plays, but it was still at a time when they were still seen as, it was really just, they were seen as, this is sort of a form of seduction, and men would go to the theater to see these women in pants. And it was sort of that they were more still considered kind of objects at this point on stage, as opposed to being actually considered for their acting abilities and for their talents. But they were able to make a very good living in acting. So that is a main. So it's important to remember that the breeches roles, and that will most likely be a question on your test there. So let's go ahead and stop this share here. Okay. So that was just a little bit about the English Restoration, and I hope you're able to look over that. I am going to be sending out a study sheet very soon. A lot of you have been asking about the open book test. That won't be until April 22nd, and I think it's going to be due April 23rd. I'm going to send out a study sheet, but you are able to use your book. You are able to use these videos and PowerPoints that I'll be sharing with you. Also, please remember to do the discussion board, and the next one is going to be due by this Sunday at midnight. I know I'm giving you a lot of time to do that purposely, but I would love if everyone could do that as soon as possible, and of course, while also being able to upload your IRs there as well. And that's all for this week. I'll be posting another video next week as we move more into realism and naturalism and romanticism in the late 19th century and early 20th century. All right, everyone. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy as we continue to ride this thing out. All right. I'll see you all soon. Take care.